Welcome to the Rocker Dog Podcast, the only podcast in this solar system that talks to musicians about their canine companions. I'm your host, Tim Dill, along with my needy golden doodle, Charlie, and today we're happy to welcome indie rocker and author Sadie Dupuis of Speedy Ortiz and Sad13, whose book of poetry, Cry Perfume, was released this past October with an audiobook on the way. And this is her Instagram famous Rocker Dog.
Well, only one of my dogs is here right now, and This is Lavender. Where'd she go? She's under my chair. Lavender, if you were to look up, you'd see Tim here, but she has decided to fall asleep. And my other dog is Buster. He's not here today, but he's also a pit bull mix of the white and spotted variety.
Okay, and how old are these two?
Buster, I believe, turned 12 a couple months ago.
Okay.
And Lavender is probably 4.
Okay. And both these are rescues. So these are these guesses as to, best estimates to their age?
Buster, we have a better guess of because he was found as a little puppy. So they probably found him when he was 2 months old. And I started fostering him. He was 4 months old. So it's a lot easier to guess a dog's age when they're, I'm sure you know, I don't need to explain to podcast dog expert, but it's easier to guess a dog's age when they're young enough. Whereas Lavender, when we started fostering her, they were like, she's 10 months old. And then they were like, actually, she's 5 years old, probably because her teeth have aged a lot more than they should since they're exposed all the time. Right. She has some facial trauma, so she's missing a big portion of her nose and her lip. So she's smiling all the time. It's very cute, but it has aged her teeth faster. So we went to our vet and we're like, what's your actual guess here based on everything else you can tell? And so we think she's now around 4.
Okay. Lavender is the celebrity of the two.
Yes, Buster's camera shy.
Okay, not to take anything away from Buster. We'll get into Lavender's story in depth. But let's start with Buster, since he goes back farther, 12 years. What was the context of him coming into your life?
Yeah, I had fostered a few dogs before Buster. And when I started fostering him, my roommate had recently passed away. And it was just a really hard and difficult time for the rest of his roommates who were obviously grieving him, but also living in the apartment where he'd passed. So we were just having a pretty rough winter. And I thought that having a dog to foster might take our minds off, our terrible loss, like put the love that we were unable to give to our friend into caring for a dog. So we started fostering Buster and pretty quickly became my first foster fail. So that was that was the context of adopting him. And unlike Lavender, Buster really loves music. And whenever I was playing guitar, he would want to come be near me. Sometimes he'd be howling along. And it would get into a problem where if I were going to rehearse at a friend's house and I'd bring him there, leave him upstairs while we're rehearsing in the basement, he's doing everything possible to get in the basement, to be near a drum set, to be near amps. This is terrible for dog's ears, but Buster's a big music lover.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that's sort of his story. And then I started touring all the time. And my mom would dog sit him while I was touring. And at some point she kind of decided to foster fail with the dog I'd already adopted. So he lives up with her most of the year at this point. Okay.
And was he helpful to you and your roommates, suffering a loss? Did he bring joy into the home, and was he a distraction in a good way?
Yeah, I've always found caring for dogs to be a big boon to my mental health, whether that's just from routine depression or obviously the grief of a loss can cause pretty serious depression. So I think that having to care for an animal and spend time with an animal and give your love and support and go outside with an animal is really a wonderful way to sort of get outside of your own head because you can't be in there and care for a dog.
Right.
So yeah, Buster was a huge help both then and still to me mentally.
Right. On that same note, talking about a therapy dog or, emotional support dog,
Yeah.
I guess I've asked this question. I'm getting to ask this question every episode, but it does seem to be, the answer does sound similar, that it's like it gets you up, it gets you out. It's something they care for. Is there another side of it? Do you look at the dog and almost look at the way they perceive life as a helpful lesson to you to maybe, not get down on yourself or not take life too seriously, or don't let things out of your control you?
Well, whatever my problems are, I'm certainly never digging around to find other dogs or
Right.
licking my own butt. So
Right. Right.
it's really not that bad to be a human. That's a very silly answer.
Right.
I think it's just, I mean, especially I really love pit bull mixes. They're not the dogs I grew up with, but they're pretty much all the dogs I've fostered and 100% of the dogs I've adopted. They're very playful and they're just so sweet and dedicated to their people. Both these dogs are major lap dogs and also just very, very sweet. So I think being around not another person, but they are to me, another person of that kind of temperament, of loving and sweet and fun, certainly has to rub off on you in some capacity.
Right. And speaking of pit bulls, were you ever, there's a lot of misinformation about pit bulls, about danger, yada, yada, yada. Were you aware of that when you took them on, or was there ever a fear of that when you took them on? Or
I was not aware of the misperception of pit bulls when I first started fostering them. And I think I was not aware because I grew up with a dog trainer who wouldn't have, had that misperception himself. So I knew a lot about different breeds of dogs and their traits and their strengths and what makes them cute and perfect. And I'm always telling that my first email address at AOL was dogsmart7 because I was 7 years old. And guess what I thought I was smart about? So I wound up fostering pit bulls because I lived in New York, and that is who is in need of an urgent home in, these high kill shelters. And this is the mid 2000s. So there's even more of a stigma against pit bulls at that point, I think, than there is now. I think now there's, TV shows and
a lot more education out there.
Hopefully. A lot more understanding about how they're just, really funny lap dogs. So those were the dogs that I fostered first. And it was really only when I realized that, hard to get an apartment with a pit bull. Certain cities, you can't even have a pit bull.
For sure.
That I became aware of that, incorrect stigma against this, very cute, very sweet, very gentle breed of dogs. Much more gentle than the Schnauzer I grew up with, or even some of the Labradors that I knew growing up.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that, your history with dogs. I mean, it sounds like you grew up with a lot of dogs, and you did say there was a trainer. Yep. That was your mother's boyfriend, I think I read.
Yep. Yeah, my mom's boyfriend for most of my childhood was a dog trainer, and he had like 10 dogs of his own at any given time. My favorite was Mindy, which was also a lab. But he always had dogs in and out for training, and he had a whole course in the backyard. The dogs go up an obstacle course or climb up a wall. They do all kinds of amazing things, and I'd be out climbing on the obstacle course with the dogs. So I grew up with a lot of dogs, and even like I had imaginary friends as a kid, but they were all also dogs. So I was doomed to have some of my own as an adult.
Now, do you train the dogs yourself as an adult?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say they're expertly trained. They don't know how to do, like Maddie, my mom's, boyfriend I was growing up, is still in my life. And I look at his Instagram. He can train dogs to do things that I can't even believe they know how to do that. Lavender knows some of the basics, and she knows, touch. She can give a kiss. She can occasionally come when called, depending on if she senses there's food for her. But I wouldn't say she knows how to do any. She can't spin around 3 times or
right.
She knows
the
go
important
to the fridge
ones.
Or something. Yeah.
Right. I read that you also, about your mother's boyfriend, that he worked miracles on them. What was it about his approach, or what did you learn from his approach or your experience around him and dealing with difficult dogs?
I know that there were dogs that he trained who had a history of violence, and he was able to basically rehabilitate them so that they were no longer any kind of risk. And I was so little that I'm not sure I know a ton about like his methodology, but there were dogs that came in because they'd attacked another dog, and the dogs were given a new name and they were now trained in a different language, and suddenly they had totally different behavioral patterns. So more so than like teaching me how to do that, I'm not a dog trainer. I don't work with dogs. It did teach me that, dogs cannot be inherently bad. They can be instructed poorly. They can not get the support they need from humans. And with the right support, dogs can change and, be the kind, sweet animals that they should be.
So true. Now let's get into Buster. I know Buster's got a lot of press out there, but let's reiterate some of his story. Now, how did you first come to know about his situation in the beginning?
Buster or Lavender?
I'm sorry, Lavender.
I was like, Buster came from North Carolina. He was found on a farm. Lavender, let's see. So Lavender was all over the local news before I fostered her. She was found in a park in Northeast Philly, and she had pretty serious facial trauma. As I mentioned, there were open sores all over her. She was pretty much starving, and she was found by the PSPCA, which is Pennsylvania's SPCA. And I had a friend who worked for them, and they were not planning on bringing her to a foster for various reasons. But my friend could kind of tell that Lavender was not thriving in the shelter, and that it would be much better if she did her recovery and ultimately preparation for surgery. She needed her nostrils reconstructed because she couldn't breathe at all through her nose. And because of that, it had caused palate issues. So she really struggled to breathe at all. So basically, my friend who worked there was like, hey, this dog is not thriving in the shelter. My friend has foster experience. She has no intention to adopt her. Can she stay with my friend? And it's a very long story that maybe isn't for podcast consumption.
Right.
But we had no intentions to adopt her, and we understood from PSPCA that there was no chance of us adopting her. So it was truly get this dog prepped and ready to have surgery ultimately, and teach her the basics so that she won't be a wild dog when she eventually winds up in a permanent home. They thought she'd never been in a home before. First thing she did when she met me, I was wearing a faux fur coat that, we adopt her late December, just chomps down on my arm, thinks I'm a big toy. I'm like, this is quite the introduction to Lavender. She's got stains all over her. She looks like from the Little Rascals or something, like a child from the Little Rascals, not so much the dog. She is a wild thing. We bring her home. She immediately jumps on a table, knocks everything off the table. But she acclimated pretty quick, and she's very smart. She's very motivated to not only get treats, but to get any kind of petting or attention. So she learned tricks pretty quickly. And about 3 months in, we learned that the PSPCA was willing to let us adopt her, which, we've been told from day one, not a chance. But
how was that even brought up? Did you guys pursue it, or did they say, oh, by the way, we've changed our stance?
There were some other adoptees in line, and they exited the picture. So we wound up with Lavender. But the question was that they had interpreted some of her behavior in shelter as dog aggressive, and
right.
They had said she could never be around another dog. So that had not been of course, I'd been very cautious walking her, but I'd never gotten that sense. She always seemed very excited and friendly when she even just spotted another dog from a block away. So this was when we did work with a trainer to do a walk and to do a dog meet to see if that was the trainer's perception as well. It was not at all. The trainer was like, this dog seems incredibly well adjusted to dogs and friendly. So we really struggled for a while to understand how this diagnosis had been handed down to Lavender. We had her meet Buster again in like a sort of controlled environment where they walk together. Buster's not even great with every dog, but he loves her. and the feeling was mutual. And it was only after we'd had her for about a year, maybe less than that, we did a dog DNA test. And it came up that she was a pit bull border collie. And we started to notice that when she sees another dog, regardless of how, well behaved and nice she's going to play, she does the stalking move, which in dogs who are not border collies is a sign of aggression. But for border collies or other kinds of working dogs, it's just bred into them.
Right.
She's basically herding other dogs to play with her. So my best guess is that she was doing some stalking and some herding in the shelter, and that got her labeled unfriendly with other dogs.
Right.
So.
My reaction to that is, wasn't she really young in the shelter? Like very young in the shelter?
She probably was. They first thought she was 10 months old, but she was actually around 2.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because of the
So she
injuries.
wasn't that young. She'd already had a few puppies, a few rounds of puppies.
Oh no! Wow.
So,
okay.
But she just has some border collie behavior. So I'd never had a dog this vocal before. All kinds of things she does. Now that I know a little bit more about border collies, I understand her better.
And what about her injuries themselves? Like a dog relies so much on their nose. I mean, it's fall out, and I heard, I think it was on NPR that they said in the fall, the dog walks out and they immediately smell decaying leaves and they know it's fall. So they get so much information. It's almost like their most important sense for them.
Yeah.
Do you see that in her behavior, the lack of it, or if they be able to restore it?
So for the first, when we were fostering her and prior to her surgery, we just figured she did not smell at all. If I had a treat in my hand, unless I showed it to her, she didn't always get it. Hiding treats or, doing nose games were not happening. And on walks, she was not interested in sniffing. Maybe 3 months post-surgery. So she did have surgery. She had her nostrils reconstructed. She had her palate shaved down, and suddenly she was like she didn't sleep before. And so she was like anxious all the time. She would fall asleep standing up and then wake up 2 seconds later. All of that stuff went away after she healed from surgery, and she started to smell again. So now she sniffs as much or more as any dog I've had. It takes half an hour to get around the block because
I was going to say,
she's got so much to investigate.
I was going to say that's great, but that's almost be careful what you wish for. If you have a dog and you got places to go.
Yes.
That's too funny. And she's also on your latest recording.
Yeah, she will be on an album that comes out next year.
Okay.
Okay. Because I'm sitting, right now she's being very good. I can't even believe she's not poking her head out. I think it's because it's raining outside, so she's mopey. Typically, if I'm in I'm in my studio right now talking to you. If I'm in here working on headphones, if I'm mixing or tracking something, she's not in my lap, so she's really unhappy, and she will start yodeling, much in the style of other border collies. So it's a very funny method of singing if you've never heard a border collie combo pit bull go off. And at some point last December, I was getting pre-production ready for this new album, and she was it was like a half hour of nonstop, Chewbacca sounds, as I sometimes describe them. So I just let the mic go and let her do her thing, and I wound up layering it into the recording, and I layered some effects onto it, so it doesn't just sound like a dog impatiently wanting to be in a lap. It sounds like a strange synth or something, but she does have quite a feature on whenever this Speedy Ortiz album comes out.
Well, we'll look forward to that. Is she going to get a publishing credit?
I mean, song was written, so I think it'll be, if anything, performance royalties.
Now, I also recognize that she's got a huge Instagram following. I think she's got like 17.2 thousand followers. Yes,
I will say that Instagram is all my partner, whose name is Dylan, and he's also a musician. And when PSPCA allowed us to foster her, they asked if we could create social media for her to bring attention to her fundraising, essentially, as well as potential adopters. So I made a Twitter that did not get very much traction, and Dylan made an Instagram that sometimes he's on tour right now, so he's not even home, and I'll just text him a picture of her and he'll post it on there, and it has more likes than anything either of us has ever received as like long-term professional musicians. So she definitely has some star power, and I don't even feel like he tries very hard, and just Lavender's face sells
Does it all.
the account. So I
Was there
definitely think she knows that she is a popular dog because she is a huge brat. So
was there competition between you and Dylan in getting the groundswell of popularity? Did you want Twitter to be more successful than Instagram, and he wanted Instagram to be more successful than Twitter?
it's more that I like using Twitter and not Instagram, and he likes using Instagram and not Twitter. So that the division of labor was more. I don't like going on Instagram, and he does.
Okay, it's funny because his Cloud Nothing's following is 18,000.
Yeah.
So she's creeping up.
Yeah, and what does she have?
Yours is 24, almost 24,000. She's got 17.2 as of this morning.
Okay, so we put her in her place. She shouldn't be too cocky.
But it's impressive. I mean, it's been up since early 2021. So I'm
then
jealous.
I look at the dogs that really like do the whole thing, and they're making reels, and they're doing SpawnCon, and I'm like, Dylan, don't you want to try to get us to like a discount on some dog food? And he is uninterested. So it's probably good that he does the Instagram and not me, because I would have made it into
commoditize it,
or like I would be spending too much time on it.
Yeah. I also saw that I saw it mentioned. I didn't see it, but do you have a tattoo, a dog tattoo?
Yeah, I do. My first tattoo was of my childhood dog, and it's a Schnauzer. And it's on my ribs, which is a really stupid place to get your first tattoo. So it's just a little cartoon of a Schnauzer.
That's great. You gotta post that sooner or later so we can all see it.
Oh, it's on there somewhere. It's not very good because it's on my ribs. This is like the number one most painful place you can get a tattoo, especially if you are, this is, I'm 34 now. I probably was 21 at the time. So the less like fat you have covering a bone, the more painful it is. I'm a 21-year-old, so I was thinner, and this was a black Schnauzer, so I had intended for it to be shaded, and I gave up. I was like, I can't. I mean, I have other. You can see I have a pretty detailed. I have other tattoos that are pretty detailed and time intensive. This was like 10 minutes of the most horrible pain I've ever been in. So yeah.
So was it stopped before? I mean, stopped before the artist wanted to finish?
I drew it. So it really, yes, it was stopped before the artist wanted to finish.
I love that. It's so funny. Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up the show. We wrap the show up with the Zoomies, which are the last 5 quick questions.
Oh,
the
wow.
First question
Lavender's favorite mode.
Well, the first question might be tricky for you, but it's, do you kiss Lavender on the mouth? And I know she doesn't really have
she's got a mouth.
Kind of.
She's got a mouth. She's just got, more teeth than other dogs. I do not let her kiss me on the face, so she gets it all out on any visitor. If anyone comes to stay, any bands come to stay with me, Lavender just wants to see, will they let me do the things mom won't? And she is licking the faces.
That's a perfect segue. My second question is, has she licked anyone famous or another musician? Famous is a loose term, but
yeah,
another popular musician.
I mean, all the musicians that have come to stay with me are like bands I love, so they're popular musicians to me. I'm trying to think of who's come to stay with us that would be interesting to listeners of the podcast.
Who needs a promo?
Pom Pom Squad endeared themselves to Lavender. The band Ohm has come, and Lavender loves them. All of my band and all of Cloud Nothings have certainly gotten their faces licked by Lavender. One thing that she gets really car sick, so we can't really take her unless we're going away, and we pretty much only go away with her unless it's to tour. We try to limit taking her in the car. So She's really only met people who've come to stay at our house, which is not a ton of people since it's been the pandemic. But if I think of any really big, like she hasn't met, Carly Rae Jepsen, but maybe it's coming. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, that was a good answer. I'm always looking for a shameless name drop. So that worked. In the world of music, if she was to engage in what you do, would she be a fan, a critic, a roadie, or a groupie?
Well, I meant to bring this up earlier when I was saying how much Buster likes music. Lavender does not like music. I put things on or I'm playing things. She's run away. She's howling for me to turn it off. So she'd be a critic, but a really mean one, I think. And it's not like there's a genre she likes. I can put on some ambient music. I can put on some like new music. That is no fly. She does seem to like when I am scrolling through Instagram and find another dog howling. So maybe it's just that she only likes dog music.
Okay. Question 4 is, do you use a dog voice when speaking to your dogs?
Depends on how she's behaving. Buster is like a perfect angel and never does anything wrong, so I don't have to use any kind of negative voice to him. Lavender is up to mischief all the time. So if she's, for example, chewing up the rug in my studio, which is a frequent Lavender activity, I think at that point I talk to her like I would to Dylan or something. Like, why did you fold the towels like that? Why are you chewing my rug? If she's being a cute little baby and it's bedtime, then I think there's a dog voice I can only tap into. Yeah. In that context. And that's probably how I talk to Buster all the time, especially now that he's a geriatric baby.
Poor Buster. Yeah. Last question is there a charity or dog organization you'd like to just give a shout out to and let our listeners know exists?
Oh, yeah. Morris Animal Refuge is a really great one in the Philly area. And I believe they were our first no-kill shelter. And now all of them are no-kill shelters. But,
fantastic. Great to hear. Well, I'll find out more about them and post on the outro. But Sadie, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and talk dogs.
This was really fun. I can't believe Lavender didn't pop her head up more. But
it's always a pleasure. I'm sad I didn't get to hear her do her yodel.
I know, she's just been asleep down here the whole time.
Lavender, now's your chance. Now's your chance.
Moody dog.
Life is more than Instagram.
Yep. Yeah, break into podcasting, Lavender.
I'll be glad to have her. Let me ask too, do you have something you want to promote for 2023? Sounds like you had new music in the hopper.
Should be an album out, but I don't know when it'll be. But I did have a book out in October, and presumably I'll have an audiobook out early next year. So definitely always helpful to have book sales. Those are a harder thing to sell than records, it turns out. So yeah, my book is called Cry Perfume, and that is the thing to check out if you want to.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And best of luck for everything in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, thank you so much. You as well.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, Sadie Dupuis, for sharing the stories of Lavender and Buster with us. Sadie gave a shout out to the Morris Animal Refuge, which is a pioneer in animal welfare, founded in 1874. The Philadelphia-based life-saving organization is committed to adoption, education, and high-quality care with the goal of finding positive and humane outcomes for animals in need. Their 26th annual Fur Ball fundraiser will be held on Friday, March 24th at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Buy tickets, bid on auction items, enter the 50-50 raffle, or make a general donation by visiting morrisanimalrefuge.org and clicking the Fur Ball link. As always, a big thank you goes out to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in and spreading the word of our existence. Stay in touch with the show on Instagram at Rocker Dog Podcast. We'll be back again next week with an all-new show featuring a rocker whose dog's behavior sometimes mimic the theme to his band's greatest hit. So join us then. All right, it's time to take a dog nap. Goodbye, everybody.